I think we're spoiled a bit in the West, so which is good. So, amen. It's great to be together. It's great seeing everybody's faces. It's good to be with the West, and it is good to try to do the, it's the speaker view. I'm going to go into my slides a little bit, but so if you try to do that, but uh, maybe someone's saying something's wrong with it, but I don't know. Anyway, do the best you can, play around with it. But if you got a Bible, you can be turning to 2 Corinthians chapter 8 as we do a little bit of good news and announcements. I'm going to jump into, well, I'll wait actually to screen share. It is good to have a couple, we have some I did want to introduce Oscar. He's here with us. He was baptized in the campus ministry a couple weeks ago, but he actually lives in Kellyville, and so he's very connected to the campus ministry. But it is good to have him here in the West, since he does live in the West and near a lot of us in the Northwest area. I think he's there somewhere. Oscar, you want to give us a wave? I see you. There you are. There he is. You got to find him. It's a game you got to play, a Zoom game. So it's good to have him, and I know there's quite a few other people visiting and lots of friends here. So it's great to have everybody together. Some today, this afternoon at 1 p.m. Riley in Canada with his and then the good news is close to 50,000 the spa region to meet the need of church. Is everyone hearing me? I think I just.
Hey, you're freezing a fair bit. Can you do it again? Oh. Well. See you, Will.
You have to continue.
You have to do it now.
I think he's trying to.
Ben.
I know the
he's trying to connect to the different internet.
I think I'm back.
I know.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, man, good on you. You were ready.
I only was going to announce Riley's baptism, but there you go.
I think maybe Ben should just preach. Maybe you just want to go for it.
Go for it, Ben.
Wow. All right, let's do it.
I'm breaking up. I'm freezing. Well, sorry about that. Hopefully this will all get better here. My Zoom just closed or something. So anyway, Riley is getting baptized. I hope everyone heard that. It's 1 p.m. today. There's a Zoom link. If you want details on that, you can ask Ben. So that'll be awesome. That's so encouraging, so exciting for the Powell family, their third son getting baptized there in Candelo. I also said earlier, we asked the church a couple weeks ago. A lot of our brothers and sisters, 60% of the church in Fiji had lost their jobs, and they were struggling. They were, paycheck to paycheck. So they didn't have money for food. And so we put out a plea to the churches in the Spa region, said, hey, if we can raise $20,000, then that could last a couple months for these brothers and sisters. The good news is that we raised close to 50,000 around the whole Spa region. So more than doubled it, which is just an incredible response and heart from all the people. And Sydney really gave a lot of that. A huge chunk did come from Sydney. So I commend you guys. That's awesome. Great job giving. And the church in Fiji is so grateful. Some other really good news is that Steve and Mel had their baby yesterday. Sophie Ruth Darvidelsky. And so I think there's, photos floating around, but that's exciting. Yesterday morning. And it's all safe and healthy. I think they're even already back home. So that's great. A couple more quick announcements. This week we are having midweeks on Wednesday night, and it's split men and women again. And so the men are going to be all together church-wide, and we're going to hear from a brother named Mulligan Price, who leads one of the regions of the London church. He's a great brother. He's fired up, and so that'll be a real treat. I was talking to him earlier this and catching up, and so it'll be great to hear from him. Chelsea will be speaking to the West women, and that'll be great as well for the women to have some time together. It's telling me my internet connection is unstable again. So is everyone still hearing me, or am I breaking up? It's a bit spotty. I'm good. Thanks, Orlando. Oh, Orlando, so encouraging. maybe is Chelsea. Are you downloading some movies or something, Chelsea? What's going on?
Yeah. I'm just watching Netflix. Sorry.
What's Danton doing? That's the real question.
Yeah, Dan's watching Paw Patrol, so that could be the reason.
Well, I'll try to keep going here and hope it stays good. I guess just let me know if you're having a hard time hearing me. Next Sunday, we're going to be on YouTube Live. And then the following week, we're in Bible Talks. And so not this coming Wednesday, but Wednesday week, which is, I think, probably the last Wednesday in May. And with that, please stay posted, because some of us may be meeting face to face, even, because you can have. We got to get clarification to what that exactly means. The government said religious gatherings up to 10 are allowed, but it's not entirely clear if that's only in a church building. And so we're going to ask some more questions, but just stay posted with that. We're not going to rush into anything. We're going to be just slow and steady behind whatever the government is saying and allows us. But the encouraging thing is we might be able to have some smaller meetings face to face. And so I know some of the Bible talks are even shrinking or splitting in size so they can meet face to face, and it's all good. Like the pros are going to go to 3 Bible talks now. And so they can have smaller groups and see each other face to face. So that's exciting. Amen. Last one is for me is that we do have a West Bible Talk leaders meeting tonight, and it'll be on Zoom. Originally was scheduled for 7, but we're asking if we can do it at 8. We'll try to keep the meeting under 45 minutes. So we'll try to keep it 8 to 8:45 for those who would like to join. There's some teen parent interviews happening this afternoon. And so those kind of ended up running a little bit later. And so we tried to push our meeting back to accommodate for that. So plan for that. I'll send out a link later. And I think Boyette has an announcement that he wanted to make. So if you can just unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. For this coming Sunday, 24th of May, just a call for the brothers. I know all the brothers have been staying fit, going to gym in your house. It's a chance to flex your muscles on Sunday, 24th, to help Cheryl
go, Ben.
move house. For Cheryl to move house from the Ponds to Seven Hills. So it's going to be from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. If you're able to come, please let me know, or let T know, so we can know who to expect and how many people will be on hand to help. So thank you very much. That's Sunday, 24th of May. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Great. Well, let's jump into the passage here, 2 Corinthians chapter 8. We'll continue our study of 2 Corinthians. The context of this passage is that the church in Jerusalem had become very poor. If you remember back like in Acts 2 and 3, the apostles preached. There's about 120 disciples at the beginning of Acts, and then Peter preaches this great sermon in Acts 2. 3,000 are baptized, and by Acts, I think it's 3, 4, or 5, the church has grown to 5,000. And so the church has blown up in size. But part of the problem was that not everybody was well off, and some of them were even from out of town, so they were trying to live in Jerusalem, be part of the church, but a lot of people were poor. And so what they did, the richer disciples in Jerusalem were selling their possessions. It talks about in Acts 2, if you remember, they were selling property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. And so they were really looking out for each other. But then a persecution breaks out in Acts 7 with the stoning of Stephen, and he's killed, he's martyred, Stephen. And then basically a lot of those disciples who were from other places originally, they all fled. And some of that maybe was good, and some of it maybe some of it was out of fear, maybe some of it wasn't, but God worked good through it anyway, because those people, when they left, they took the gospel wherever they went, and so churches naturally became planted all over the Mediterranean region. And so that was a good thing. But what happened is that the disciples who were originally from Jerusalem were left behind, impoverished, and so the church was poor. And so what Paul decides to do is take up a collection. This is much later in time, but he decides to take up a collection from the Greek churches as a way for them to express gratitude and thanks for the spiritual heritage of the church in Jerusalem, being the church that planted the church that they're living in now. But also just to look out for their brothers and sisters. If we're living in Sydney and we hear that our brothers and sisters in Fiji need some money for food? Of course, there's just a sense of that's what we do as disciples. And so the church in Corinth was very eager to give. They said, yeah, we're heaps keen. Of course, we want to look out for our brothers. But then a year passes by. And so Paul writes here in 2 Corinthians to say, okay, guys, you said you were super keen a year ago. Now I'm going to send some brothers through ahead of me on our way to back to Jerusalem. Are you guys ready to follow through on that giving? And one of those brothers that he's going to send is Titus, who the book of Titus is named for, is a letter to Titus. But this is Titus here in Corinth that we see. And the other two brothers are unnamed. So there's this group of 3 brothers that are traveling from Macedonia, which is like northern Greece, down to Corinth, which is really in the middle of Greece, to collect this contribution. So let's read here in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 16, and we'll read to 9:5. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 16. So hopefully you've all turned there by now. And I'll read it. And it says in verse 16, 2 Corinthians 8:16, excuse me. It says, thanks be to God, who put into the heart of Titus the same concern I have for you. For Titus not only welcomed our appeal, but he is coming to you with much enthusiasm and on his own initiative. And we are sending along with him the brother who is praised by all the churches for his service to the gospel. What is more, he was chosen by the churches to accompany us as we carry the offering which we administer in order to honor the Lord himself and to show our eagerness to help. We want to avoid any criticism of the way we administer this liberal gift, for we are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of man. In addition, we are sending with them our brother, who has often proved to us in many ways that he is zealous, and now even more so because of his great confidence in you. As for Titus, he is my partner and co-worker among you. As for our brothers, they are representatives of the church and an honor to Christ. Therefore, show these men the proof of your love and the reason for our pride in you so that the churches can see it. There is no need for me to write to you about this service to the Lord's people, for I know your eagerness to help. I've been boasting about it to the Macedonians, telling them that since last year, you and Achaia were ready to give, and your enthusiasm has stirred most of them to action. But I am sending the brothers in order that our boasting about you in this matter should not prove hollow, but that you may be ready as I said you would be. For if any Macedonians come to me and find you unprepared, we, not to say anything about you, would be ashamed of having been so confident. So I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to visit you in advance and finish the arrangements for the generous gift you had promised. Then it will be ready as a generous gift and not as one grudgingly given. And we'll stop there. And we'll talk about 3 points from the text. Now I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides, but I don't have many, so I might pop in and out of it. I'll do the best I can. So here's the text, 2 Corinthians 8:16 to 9:5. And the first point is your own initiative. Your own initiative. Paul begins by praising these different brothers. Again, it's Titus and then these 2 unnamed brothers. And he says in verse 16 and 17, thanks be to God who put it into the heart of Titus the same concern I have for you. For Titus not only welcomed our appeal, but he is coming to you with much enthusiasm and on his own initiatives. And one of the main things that Paul is inspired by here, I might just pop out of this. One of the main things that Paul is inspired by is the fact that Titus wants to go to Corinth on his own initiative. Yes, Paul wants him to go, but that's not the only reason he's going. It seems like Titus would be going to Corinth regardless. Even if Paul hadn't encouraged him to, he wanted to go to encourage the church himself. He's taking ownership. He's going on his own accord, which is what the Greek word there more literally translates to, his own accord. No one is forcing him to go. He wants to go. He wants to go give to the church, encourage the church, and help the church. When I think about our church, when I think about the West region, I think in general, we are very good at responding to challenges and responding to the needs and responding when a situation comes up. If I say, hey, we need someone to lead a new Bible talk, I know that there's several brothers that will put their hands up. That was a need this last week, as we're trying to maybe make our groups smaller. I had several brothers say, hey, I'm willing to do it, which I appreciate so much. I'm willing to do it. If I say, hey, could someone in the church go visit so-and-so in the hospital, I know that a ton of hands would go up because all of you have that heart to do those things, to do good things, which is great. And I think particularly in the West region, I know all of you do so much. Even the response to the needs in Fiji, in the church there is incredible. And I commend all of you for that. But what about taking all of that higher? What about not just waiting for someone to ask you and then responding, which again is a great heart. What about taking that higher? What about doing things on your own initiative, even before you're asked? Which is basically what Titus, the spirit of Titus right here. I want to do something great for Jesus. And I'm not going to wait around to be asked to do it. And great, Paul wants me to do it. Great, I wanted to do it anyway. My own initiative. For us, it's like, I'm not going to wait for someone to ask me. I'm going to set up my own evangelism time with the professionals. I'm going to have my own hospitality night. I'm not going to wait for Will to challenge the region to have each other over for dinner. I'm going to go after that myself. I'm going to serve that brother or sister who needs encouragement without anybody asking me, but just because of my own initiative for Jesus, because I want to do something great for Jesus. I want to serve the church on my own initiative. I'm looking for the needs in the church. I'm looking around. What are the needs? Who needs encouragement? Who needs service? Who's not here? Who's been missing? Who's discouraged? And I'm going to take my own initiative to go love that person and encourage them. Taking our own initiative for Jesus. This is the quality that people look for, even in the secular world. If you're applying for a job or getting a recommendation, sometimes I fill out recommendations for different guys in the church that apply for jobs. They put me down as a character reference, and I make up all sorts of nice stuff about them. That's a joke. But one of the questions sometimes that comes up is he the kind of person that takes his own initiative? Even the secular world is looking for that quality. Often, we used to lead the teens ministry before Ben and Brooke, and often we would challenge the teens as we were studying the Bible with them, as part of their repentance and them really changing. Hey, take some initiative around the house. Do some cleaning and do some chores before you're even asked, and as a way to encourage your parents and show them even just that you really are changing, that you want to serve around the house. And the parents generally were so excited about that. And it's even really a good reminder right now for Vincent and Diego and Nick and others. Just come on, get on that a little bit. But I think, man, if you can do it for your parents, or if you can do it for your boss, or to get that new job, if you can take your own initiative in those areas, what about doing it for Jesus? What about doing it for the kingdom? I mean, how much more so should we be taking initiative for Jesus and for his kingdom? We don't want to live the begrudging disciple life, like Paul talks about at the end of the passage. You don't want to give the gift begrudgingly. I guess I'll serve if I have to. Will kind of got on my back. Ben got on me about it. So yeah, okay, I'll go help that sister move. What about just saying, hey, I'm there. I'm going to find out the needs. I'm taking my own initiative, and I'm enthusiastic. That's the other thing that Paul says about Titus. He's enthusiastic, and that word comes up again later in chapter 9, the part we read. The word enthusiastic is in there twice. Does that describe your current life as a disciple? You're enthusiastic about serving Jesus. You're enthusiastic about the kingdom. Would your family or your friends describe you as enthusiastic about Jesus? I think that's convicting for all of us to think about. I'm fired up. I'm enthusiastic, and this is not just some, fake fired up. I mean, this is what the scripture says, that twice, enthusiastic to take his own initiative in this way. I think a great example of this is the De La Costa family. We had a West leaders meeting a few weeks ago. Actually, it was probably longer than that. Time's all kind of vague. I think like a week ago, if it was February, I thought, but it seems like it's June now, or almost June. So anyway, it's all confusing for all of us. But at the beginning of this whole crisis, I think it must have been late March, we had a West leaders meeting, and we said, look, let's talk. And who in the West maybe needs some encouragement right now, as everything was shutting down and we weren't meeting? And is there anyone that is having a hard time, or someone lost a job? Can we make sure we're taking care of everybody? And so we made a list. Here's some people we really want to make sure are doing okay, just because when you can't see each other face to face, that's the shepherd's job, isn't it? The shepherd's job, look after the sheep. Are all the sheep okay when the crisis comes? And so we had that kind of conversation, and we were talking about, okay, who needs some encouragement, who needs some service, who needs groceries, what can we do? And so we were talking about all these people, and we made this list, and we said, let's divide this up and really make sure we're doing a great job. The shepherds taking care of the sheep. But in that list, the De La Costa family had already, before we even wrote that list, they'd already visited half those people already. And I don't know the exact number, but that's how it felt like. I was like, oh, they've already done this, And I know there's a lot of great examples of that too in the church, but I was encouraged by that, because I just thought, man, there's someone that's someone who takes their own initiative. That's someone who really is saying, hey, things are getting crazy. I see that there's different needs. I'm going to go after it before I'm even asked, which I was inspired by. I felt called higher by. I felt like, man, I gotta be doing that too. I appreciate their example in that way. I don't see their square here. Oh, there they are. Okay, there he is. Yeah. So let's be a church, brothers and sisters, that takes our own initiative. We don't just wait around being asked to do something. And amen, I know all of us are so good-hearted that when we are asked, we do things, and that's part of life too. But really try to take that higher and say, let's grow in our drive and our passion for Jesus. And what's something you can do this week on your own initiative? No one's asked you to do it. No one's telling you, but hey, I want to do this for Jesus. I want to serve his kingdom in this way. What's one specific practical thing? And we'll discuss that in our breakout groups later, but be thinking about that. What's something I can do this week to take my own initiative? Second point, do what is right. Do what is right. And I'll share my screen again here. Do what is right. I'm just going to take a quick breather, because normally this is a natural break where I can kind of catch my breath and have a sip of water. So it's not water though. Do what is right. Paul goes on to explain that they're sending two other brothers again along to Corinth with Titus, and to collect this monetary gift. So it's this group of three that are heading down from Macedonia in the north to Corinth. And he lists some of their qualities in verses 18 and 19 and 22 as well. If you look at that, he talks about how they have great service to the gospel. They're eager to help. They're zealous and confident in their relationships. And the reason that they are sending these other brothers as well is to make sure that they are doing what is right in the eyes of the Lord. And that's what he says. We want to make sure we're doing what's right in the eyes of the Lord and in the eyes of man. That's the reason we're sending this group, which is what he says in verse 20 and 22. We want to avoid any criticism of the way we administer this liberal gift. We are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of man. And so it's a twofold purpose. What's right in the eyes of the Lord? I might just stop share here. What's right in the eyes of the Lord is to give sacrificially, to be honest with the way that they bring this gift. What's right in the eyes of man? Well, to make sure that it's done above reproach, to make sure that no one could accuse them of embezzling this money or taking some off the top. When you start collecting money, it's easy at times for people to get critical or mistrustful. Who's taking the money, who's carrying it, how much did they leave with, and what did they arrive with? Those kind of, and some of those are probably fair questions. There's got to be a sense of taking pains to do what is right, and particularly those questions come up anytime there's some sort of collection of money. But you can kind of take that and those are good questions to an extent, but you could take that too far and get critical and mistrustful. So what Paul's saying is, look, we're sending three guys, and all of them are known for their trustworthiness, for their spirituality. And there's a reason we're not just sending one guy who's got, shady character. We're sending three guys that are known for being trustworthy, known for having those kind of qualities. And when he says we've done this in verse 20 to avoid any criticism, because we want to do this all above reproach. Sometimes what men say and what God say are very different. I was talking to this brother Mulligan this past week. We were on Zoom. We chatted for a while, and just caught up. I've met him. We've talked several times. I've met him before a few times, and so we were kind of just catching up. And he was telling me that in England, the lockdowns there obviously are have been way more restrictive. And he said it's been challenging. And he actually said one of the things the prime minister specifically said, Boris, I guess while he was in hospital maybe or sometime, he said one of the restrictions was no baptisms allowed, specifically stated. You know how we got our list of here's 14 reasons you can leave your house and things that are okay, things that are not okay. We actually we even specifically called the government to say, hey, what should we do about baptisms? They said for us, it's okay as long as you stick to the 2-person. This was back then, the 2-person. Now it's 10. And so we're always trying to figure out, let's do what's right, of course, in that sense. But in England, the guys, Boris said no baptism specifically on their list. And so they said, okay, gosh, what do you do? What do you do in that situation? The government says you can't baptize anybody. But of course, we understand theologically, how can you do that? Oh, sorry, I can't baptize. I know you want to get forgiven of your sins, but I can't baptize you because the government said so. Try talking to anybody who became a Christian in the first 300 years of Christianity. That's what they went through, And so he said, look, obviously the government said this, but we still had to do what was right, and we were very careful and we kept it very small. But you can't, sometimes what God says and what man says are very different. And like Peter says in Acts chapter 5, we must obey God rather than men. Now, it's always nice when that doesn't happen. It's a little more convenient, but there's a sense of, okay, obey God rather than men when those two things are different. But sometimes there's overlap, what God says and what man says, sometimes there's more similarities, and there is a lot of overlap. And when that's the case, we need to take pains to do what is right, which is what Paul's talking about in this passage. What God thinks it's right to be honest and above reproach, and men think the same thing when it comes to collecting money, right? Everybody thinks let's be honest and have integrity about this example. Taking pains means it's not always the easiest way. There's generally a shortcut. There's generally a faster way, a more convenient way. The easier way is just to send one guy down there, send the guy who can get there the quickest, get the money and come back, But Paul says, no, we're taking pains. We're sending more guys than we need to collect this money because we're taking pains to do what is right. There's some obvious practicals of this, the way we handle money as a church. We should always do it above reproach, and we do in the Sydney church. We have very strict guidelines about those things, about when money is collected. Part of the reason we have an annual general meeting every year, if you guys remember, usually in June, every year in the church, we have that one service where at the end, Richard Parrott and Rodney get up and no offense to them, but it ends up, it's generally a boring meeting. We're all sitting there for, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. But, and I appreciate them because they're trying to make sure that we're keeping in line with the government expectations and standards of an organization, taking pains to do what is right. That's a painful meeting. That's a joke, kind of, but but it's a sense of no one really wants to have an annual general meeting, but it's a taking pains to do what is right, and also at that meeting, the church stats are put up and the money collected and where it all goes, all that's transparent. Taking pains to do what is right. Andrew said, "Hey, AGM isn't boring at all." I guess some people are excited by it, and small minority. Sorry, kids. But it's, I of course I'm joking around when I say that, but I'm very supportive of that because it's a sense of the church is taking pains to do what is right. Even with coronavirus, like I was saying, as long as the New South Wales laws don't go against scripture, we're going to take pains to do what is right. And we've done that. We've called them several times. Let's find out exactly let's do what is right in the eyes of man. As long as it doesn't contradict scripture, take pains to do what is right. And I think there's a deeper reason for all of this. I'm reminded of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, verse 16. I think there's a slide for this here. Matthew 5, verse 16, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And similarly, in 1 Peter, there's some fire there. That was for the teens. If you saw the transition, I'll do one more time. 1 Peter 2:12, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. When we take pains to do what is right, when we live with integrity, even non-Christians see that, and they can tell there's something different about us, and they're attracted to it. And that even though they may have initial accusations of wrongdoing, when they start to look more closely, the accusations fade. Because the closer they get to the church, the closer they get to us as disciples, the more integrity they see. And that's how we should be. We're taking pains to, of course, always do what's right in God's eyes, but even in the eyes of men. And the deeper reason is so God may be glorified and people may become Christians. Most people and businesses and organizations, the closer you get, the uglier it gets. There's some brothers and sisters with Zoom. They tend to, most people kind of tend to sit at about this distance, it's kind of, normal level. There's one brother on staff in particular, we joke him about it, Howie. He's fine with me joking him about this because I do it all the time, but he always tends to sit very close to the screen. And I might just stop share to really drive home this point. He tends to kind of go like this. He's like, we're in staff meeting. He's kind of like right here. And you're kind of like, okay, you can back up a little bit, bro. We don't need to see that close. For most of us, the closer you get, the more of our imperfections you see. You get a little close, you start to see, okay, his skin's not so, okay, he's got some problem, that's just true for most of us. I don't mean to offend anybody. There's a select few of you that are so beautiful. Like Rodney's mullet is an example of the opposite. The closer you get, the more beautiful it gets. But most of us, the closer you get, you start to see the imperfections. And even a lot of organizations can be that way, and businesses, you start to do the audit, you get a little closer, you look more closely. And you think, okay, there's some shady things going on in this organization or this business. And although we are imperfect people as disciples, there should be a sense of the closer you get to the Sydney church, the closer you get to disciples, the more you see our integrity, the more you see us taking pains to do what is right. We're not perfect, but at least we're transparent. And we are taking pains to have integrity as a church. And so the closer you get to us, that's actually what you see. Yeah, we're not, but I'm not saying we're perfect, but you really do see us having integrity, taking pains to do what is right, always in the eyes of God, of course, first and foremost, but also when it matches up in the eyes of men so that people will see and glorify God. Let us be a church that does just that. And the third and final point here as we close out this morning, then we'll have some great breakout groups. Everybody's is going like this now. Everyone's like, oh, I should probably back up a little bit here. Zoom out here. Third and final point is healthy follow-up. Healthy follow-up. I talked about this point a little bit a few weeks ago, but sometimes it's good to have follow-up, as the point. It's kind of a self-fulfilling point. Does that make sense? Healthy follow-up. Paul says at the beginning of chapter 9, I don't even really need to write to you guys about this because you've been so eager to help. You've been so eager that I was boasting about you. So Paul was in Corinth and he goes to Macedonia and he's been bragging about them. He's like, man, the Corinthians are so keen to give. And that enthusiasm stirred others to action. But then he says, but now I'm writing to remind you so that our boasting will not prove hollow, which is basically, that's kind of all what he says in chapter 9, verses 1 to 5. Paul has some healthy follow-up here. You said you were keen to give a year ago. Now it's time to follow through. Jesus will do the same thing in John chapter 5. at the pool of Siloam, where there's the invalid. If you know the story, there's an invalid who's been unwell for 38 years, and the story goes that there's an angel that comes and stirs the water, and the first person to get it when the water is stirred is magically or super magically healed or something like that. The Jesus walks up to this guy and says, the story goes, do you want to get well? And he makes all his excuses, if you remember the passage, and he says, all the reasons he can't get well, but then Jesus heals him. And then the Pharisees get involved, and the Pharisees say, they see this guy walking around carrying his mat. And they say, hey, why are you carrying your mat? It's the Sabbath. You're not supposed to do work. And he says, well, the guy who healed me said, get up, pick up your mat, and walk, or be healed, or something like that, along those lines that Jesus says. And Jesus then comes back later to the same man, and I'll just show you the verse here. Here's healthy follow-up. In John chapter 5, verse 14 to 15. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, see, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. It's not entirely clear if that was a good thing or a bad thing that he did, that he told them it was Jesus. Either he was proclaiming Jesus, it was Jesus who healed me, or either he was snitching on Jesus, oh, it's Jesus, go get him. If you keep reading, it seems like maybe it was more of the snitching. That because then the heat starts to get turned up on Jesus and his ministry. But Jesus follows up on this guy. He comes back later and finds him. This is the second interaction that they've had. Hey, stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. That's a pretty blunt way to follow up with somebody, but maybe we should be saying that to each other sometimes. Hey, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. If it's good enough follow up for Jesus, it's probably good enough follow up for us. And sometimes it is just that simple. Hey, stop sinning, or something worse is going to happen. Wake up, is what Jesus is saying there. But I think this is an important part of all of our relationships in the church, making sure that we follow up with one another. Hey, how are you going? I remember you told me last week that you wanted to write a sin list out and really be more in touch with your sin. How's that going? Hey, did you ever talk to that sister and apologize to her? Did you get open with that brother like you wanted to? Hey, how's your purity going since we last talked? How have your quiet times been in the last month? Some of that, sometimes these are uncomfortable talks, but we have to understand how necessary they are, that they're a healthy part of all relationships. Jesus did it. Paul did it. So I think that means probably you and I should do it too in our relationships with one another, that we should have this. Okay, let's follow up with each other. And this is a two-way street, of course. We need to think both ways. How am I doing with following up with people that I've talked to? The guys in my Bible talk, the girls in my Bible talk, maybe the people I disciple. Am I doing a good job following up with them? And then how am I doing when I receive follow-up? When someone, comes back and says, hey, you said a month ago you wanted to do this, and how's it going? Do I handle that well? Do I get defensive? Do I make excuses? Or do I say, hey, I appreciate you bringing that up. I need to hear that. Thank you so much for that. I think sometimes we don't follow up with one another as much as we should be following up. I think that's just probably a fact. And sometimes it's just plain laziness. Sometimes we don't want to have the hard talks. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes we just want to give up. Maybe we've lost a bit of our love for one another. I think this would have been an uncomfortable thing for Paul to write. It's like, hey, do you guys remember that thing that you said you would do a year ago? I mean, that's probably an uncomfortable conversation a little bit, right? Do you remember that thing you said you would do a year ago? Could you still do that? I've been bragging about you guys to this other church, and I really want to make sure that I don't look like a fool. So can you follow? There's some sense of this. This is not necessarily an easy thing to bring up, but Paul says, no, we have to have the depth of love for one another where we do follow up. We love each other enough where even if it's a hard conversation, that we're still gonna go for it because we truly care about each other's well-being. All of us know that there are times that we start things but don't finish them. Everybody knows that, right? Maybe it's a book that you started reading. Maybe it's a DIY project that you started around the house. We've all started things and not finished them. I've been working on this study series recently. I had this idea a couple of years ago to make a study series, kind of like Cross Bearers, that could be used in training leaders, training new leaders. And so it's kind of similar format to Cross Bearers, our follow-up studies and with some scriptures and some concepts that are good, helpful for training up leaders. And I had that idea about 2 years ago, and I'm still working on it right now. So I'm trying to finish it now for real. But we all do that, right? We all start things sometimes and don't finish them. I know Assure sometimes, talks about working out, but you kind of think, come on, man, what have you been doing? You never followed through on that one. I'm just picking on him now. Healthy follow-up for him. But, we all understand that. And so that's true for us spiritually as well, that sometimes we have good intentions to change something. We hear a great sermon, or we're in a D group and we say, I really want to change this. But then what happens? And so we have to really see our need. This is such a good part of healthy biblical one another relationships, that we talk about these things. How are you going with that? You said you wanted to do that. How's it going now? If you ever play golf or tennis, you know that follow through is an essential part of those sports. Following through on your shot. This is I've got this up here particularly for Ben and for Anton, because I know they need some help. Ricardo and myself, we don't really need this as much, but for sure for Anton and Ben, this is for them to learn how to play golf. But and there's a lot of sports like this. Even cricket and other sports where you hit a ball with some sort of bat. Sometimes it's the part of the swing that people forget about, because you think, oh, I've already hit the ball. What more can I do? But if you watch any sort of video or you've ever played any of these sports and you've been coached, you know that any coach will tell you got to follow through. You got to finish the shot. You got to go all the way around, because that's part of having a good shot. Follow through is crucial for hitting a great shot. And in the same way, brothers and sisters, our follow through with one another is crucial to the spiritual health of our church. That we have these kind of relationships with one another, that we don't just leave things hanging. Hey, I know that guy said he was really going to go after that, but he never did. So, well, I guess that's that. What kind of shallow relationships are those? We got to have a sense of, we talk and we call each other higher, and then we follow up. How is that going? And it's a two-way street. Of course, always that we're open to following up and we're responding to that kind of follow-up. I know I'm so grateful when brothers do this for me in my life. Hey, you said you were going to do that. How's it going now? 2 weeks later, 2 months later, let's have some of that follow-up. And so let's make sure that we are a church that follows through. We don't shrink back. We don't give up, even if it's much later, like for Paul here, a year later or more, that we follow up with one another. And so to close out, there's 3 points from the passage there. Your own initiative, do what is right, and healthy follow up. And now what we're going to do is go into our breakout groups for about 10, 15 minutes. And I'll try to give you guys countdowns, but just have some time. And I have a couple questions here, so I'll put these up on the screen. Have some time to discuss these questions. And I do really encourage everyone to stick around and be part of this fellowship. This is our fellowship time as a church. And so, okay, you come and hear the lesson. Great, you've received, but now this is our opportunity to give. As we all know, the scriptures call us to encourage one another daily, to come to church ready to give. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. You come in with the mindset of, how can I give and encourage? So I encourage you guys, turn your cameras on, get engaged, go into your breakout rooms ready to give and serve and encourage one another. So here are some questions to think about. What is one thing you can do this week for Jesus on your own initiative? Be specific. So that's kind of a simple one. You guys can take a photo of this if you want. That might help. And then how are you doing with healthy follow-up in your life, both on the receiving and giving end? Is that something that's happening in your life? Are you following up with other people? Are people following up with you? How are you going with that? How do you respond to follow-up? Is there something that you've started but you haven't finished? Maybe is another way also of wording that. And so let's go into breakout groups here. And again, I encourage everybody really come in with a mindset and a heart. I'm here to give and serve and encourage one another. So I'm going to do the breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together for a final prayer together. are open. So we'll see you guys all about 11:25 or so